You won't believe what's happening in the Supreme Court right now. I'd say this is a victory. I'd even say this is a huge victory for Trump and for us in the Supreme Court. Gentlemen, you might say I'm celebrating too early. You might say don't count your chickens before they hatch. In this case, the final decision will be made in the spring, not in the fall. But nevertheless, the meaning of the saying doesn't change because of that. But I want you to listen to the recordings of what the judges in the Supreme Court said when they asked those on the other side to defend their position. And then you'll probably understand what the final verdict will be, but you're probably asking yourself, what is he talking about? He's talking about changing the absolutely crazy rule made up by the Democrats that any ballot, whenever it arrives, if it has a postmark showing it was mailed before the end of Election Day, must be accepted and counted. I really hope you understand that these are two very different things. When a person brings it in on Election Day, or when it just has a postmark. I really hope you understand. In summary, everything looks fine at first. You take your ballot to the post office. If you have the right to vote by mail on Election Day, it means you must get official absentee authorization. Then the post office delivers it 3 days after Election Day ends. 3, 4, 5, 2, I don't know, right? But it's not your fault that the post office took so long to deliver it. You did everything right, so as the Democrats say, your vote should be counted. And we'll talk later about what arguments the Trump administration presented when trying to change this rule and why it's clear to all observers what decision will be made. And this is a momentous decision for the fate of the United States. Another topic that concerns everyone is the 15 points of agreement, as Trump announced. What is that? These are 15 points of the agreement that America wants Iran not only to sign, but also to implement based on the principle of trust, but verify. Today we know that Kushner, Vitkov, and maybe even Vice President Vance are preparing to fly to Islamabad by the end of this week. This is not in Pakistan. To hold negotiations on Iran, with whom, is still completely unknown. They understand, but we don't, because everyone who has any power and influence. Iran has already announced that they are not participating in any negotiations, and that it's a complete lie, so why is a team of negotiators flying there? So supposedly no one in Iran knows about these mythical representatives of Iran. So let's start with these 15 points of agreement or accord. On March 23 of this year, Trump stated that the U.S. and Iran had held serious negotiations and reached agreement on many points, claiming that there are now 15 points of agreement. The negotiations, as Trump informed us, are being conducted by Steve Vitkov and Jared Kushner, and Washington's central demand remains unchanged. Iran must not possess nuclear weapons. Trump reported that the U.S. is postponing strikes on Iran's energy infrastructure for 5 days earlier. He said that in 48 hours we would bomb, right?
То есть пока продолжаются переговоры.
In other words, he set a certain bar, a deadline, a red line there. 5 days of negotiations, you have to reach something. Maybe in 5 days. He'll say, we're almost there, we just need 2 more days. I'll extend it for another 2 days. I'll extend it for another 2 days. But for now, it's 5 days. Earlier, he threatened to destroy Iran's power plants within 48 hours. So if Iran doesn't open the Hormuz Strait, the Iranian side publicly denies the very fact of negotiations. The account of the Iranian parliament speaker. So Ghalibaf denied the report about his contact with the Americans because there were speculations that he was the one doing it, calling it fake and saying it was meant to manipulate the oil markets. So he spoke on camera and said, look around, I'm at home, I haven't flown anywhere, I'm not in Islamabad, I'm nowhere. Well, was he scared that his own people would set him up? Why is Iran denying it? So one option is that there are no negotiations at all, and another option, actually I tend to lean toward this one more. This is classic Middle Eastern diplomacy, where contacts are secret, public denial, the Iranian parliament. It's politically disadvantageous for the leadership to admit inside the country that they're wavering. They say, we stand there like rocks, like cliffs. But in reality, they're nervous and maybe they're negotiating with the aggressor themselves, which would show weakness and uncertainty. The U.S. demanded a complete halt to uranium enrichment and the transfer of existing enriched uranium stocks from Iran. They have 60%, they have 20%. And once the IAEA even found their, how much was it, 84.7, 87.4, something like that, percent? I don't remember exactly. The winding down of the missile program, stopping support for regional armed groups, well, terrorist groups, that is. And then there's also recognizing Israel and something else. Well, those are the confirmed points. According to CNN and regional sources, what is included in those 14 points? This includes limiting Tehran's defense capabilities, stopping support for pro-Iranian proxy groups, recognizing Israel's right to exist, and the U.S. insists on gaining control over Iran's high-level uranium enrichment. Supposedly, they hid it somewhere under a nuclear facility in Isfahan, and Trump stated directly, "We need nuclear dust." That is, we will get it. Everything you produce there, we will get all of it. And, well, naturally, the very first discovery, Iran placed underwater mines in the Strait, specifically Iranian-made ones. There are two known mines, namely Makam 3 and Makam 7. What does a demanding person do to avoid triggering impulses that are especially complex from a military point of view? This list is almost a word-for-word repetition of the demands that the U.S. made to Iran during negotiations last year. So basically, this is the same pre-war ultimatum that reached a dead end and eventually led to war, because when the Americans realized that there was no real goal to the negotiations except stalling, they said, "Okay, that's enough. Stop messing with us." And as they say, diplomacy didn't work, and the guns started talking. Let's say some Iranian officials secretly made a deal with Trump. What happens next? The IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, is not obligated to comply. They have their own army, their own intelligence, their own money, their own business empires, so to speak. They are a state within a state. There are actually three possible scenarios. Scenario 1 is that the officials come to an agreement, but the IRGC doesn't care. This is the most likely one right now. They don't care and they sabotage it. Any agreement on paper will be ignored on the ground, the missiles won't go anywhere, uranium enrichment will continue secretly. So it's completely pointless, just for show. Usually Trump responds to this. That's what's happening. Scenario 2, the US strikes the IRGC directly. It's already happening. Those who were killed, the IRGC commander, what's his name, Pakpour, the defense minister, this is an attempt to specifically decapitate the IRGC resistance forces, not just put pressure on negotiators, and the army hasn't been touched yet. Well, except for the Navy and Air Force, the ground forces hasn't been touched. Scenario 3, the IRGC splits from within. Some commanders decide that the regime has lost and it's time to save themselves. Historically, this is the only real way such regimes actually collapse. There's a historical example. Iraq 2003 Saddam Hussein also had an absolutely fanatically loyal guard, but when it became clear that the regime was collapsing, well, that was it. It was collapsing. There was no holding it together. The commanders started to scatter, take bribes, and make personal deals with the Americans, so to speak. The structure fell apart faster than anyone expected. So the conclusion about Iran today is this: civilian negotiators can sign whatever they want, but real implementation of the agreement is only possible if the IRGC is, let's say, physically destroyed or decapitated to the point where it can't resist. Or the remaining IRGC commanders decide that personal survival is more important than ideology, or at least some of them do. Trump apparently is betting on both options at the same time, that is physical destruction and personal survival. He applies military pressure and negotiates, hoping that one will speed up the other. So, as I already said, there is no public confirmation from Iran about negotiations. There are no specific confirmed reports in open sources that the general and the IRGC are secretly negotiating with the Americans or the Israelis. But that doesn't mean anything. Such things, by definition, do not make it into the press. There are indirect signs that something is happening inside the IRGC, that not everything, so to speak, is in order. So, the Iranian foreign minister, that's IRGC, stated in an interview with Al Jazeera that some Iranian military units have become, Listen to this. Independent and somewhat isolated. Well, what does that mean? You can't even send carrier pigeons in there, right? In other words, you can't go there. They operate supposedly according to general instructions and not under the strict control of the civilian government. Well, if you think about it for a second, you realize that, in fact, the foreign minister said that central control over the army has already been lost. The IRGC is facing factional tensions and institutional fatigue, which of course have been exacerbated by the losses and reputational damage from the conflict with Israel in 2024 and 2025. The regular army, that's Artesh, is a completely different organization and is expanding its influence. According to some reports and rumors, while the IRGC is experiencing a relative decline, and here it's quite possible that Trump isn't negotiating with anyone at all, but just to make them rush. I'm first. No, I'm first. No, I'm first, he says. Well, guys, you're already too late. That means someone is already negotiating with me. You're finished. That's also possible.
Теперь
Now, the main fact probably is that the top leadership of the IRGC has literally been wiped out. During the strikes, the IRGC commander Mohammad Pakpour, Defense Minister Aziz Nasirzadeh, Chief of the General Staff Abdul Rahim Musavi, basically the entire top military leadership, were all killed at the same time. When the top leadership is destroyed, the remaining generals are forced to think about their own survival. This is exactly the moment when secret contacts are most likely, but of course there are also conflicting signals. According to American intelligence, the Iranian regime is consolidating power. A weakened but tougher government is expected in Tehran, one that relies specifically on the IRGC. Here is my conclusion from this. Rumors about secret contacts between IRGC generals and Americans or Israelis are most likely not entirely made up. Historically, this always happens when regimes collapse, but there is no public evidence. The regime is still holding on for now, but cracks are already visible and they will widen with each week of the war. On the night of March 24, the IRGC of Iran attacked Tel Aviv, Eilat, and Dimona with several waves of missiles, a total of 6 waves during the night. Debris damaged residential buildings, and there are injured people in Tel Aviv. I don't remember how many right now. Israel launched a retaliatory strike on the main IRGC headquarters in Tehran, on Hezbollah facilities in Beirut, and on targets in southern Lebanon. Israel is beginning to mobilize 400,000 reservists. For a country like that, it's a huge number. The U.S. considers the Speaker of the Iranian Parliament, Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, as a potential future leader, while Ghalibaf himself denies any negotiations. On the night of March 24, Russia carried out a massive and combined strike on 11 regions of Ukraine, cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, and UAVs. 4 people were killed, dozens were injured, including children. Gasoline prices in the U.S. are $3.93 per gal on average, up from $2.98 before the war, which is a 32% increase in 3 weeks. A 10% increase per week is a huge jump. An average family, incredible. An average family will spend an additional $740 on gasoline this year if this continues. And now to the long-awaited yet still incredible event in the Supreme Court. What's the problem with ballots that arrive after the voting has ended? In several states, and these were exactly the states and districts where only a small number of votes were needed to turn a loss into a win. Suddenly, during the 2, sometimes 3 or 4 days after the voting ended, thousands and sometimes even tens of thousands of ballots arrived. All of them had stamps claiming they were supposedly sent before the end of voting. Sometimes there were even ballots where out of 30 or 40 items it was marked for this senator, for this mayor, for this one. All of that was left absolutely blank and only one president was marked. Which one? Biden. You guessed it. No one knows where they came from, but all of them had post office stamps showing they were sent on time.
Something
Huge just happened in
Что-то
Washington.
Something happened in Washington that will greatly affect the upcoming midterm elections. The Supreme Court justices have just systematically destroyed one of the left's most powerful tools for stealing votes. And you know exactly what I'm talking about. Those mysterious envelopes that keep showing up after Election Day, those ballots that materialize out of nowhere days later after you've already cast your vote. And somehow they always seem to lean one way. Well, that's not going to happen anymore.
So what happened? Why are the Republicans so happy and the Democrats so upset? Well, not only did what I'm about to tell you happen, emboldened Republicans have renewed their pressure on the Senate to pass a voting law, the main point of which is that only citizens of the United States of America have the right to vote. Honestly, it sounds idiotic because any normal person would say, well, obviously only citizens should be allowed to vote. Yes, that's clear, but the two sides have completely different attitudes toward this. One demands to stop illegal voting, and the other wants to expand it and give as much opportunity for cheating as possible. Makes you wonder why, doesn't it?
Because right now the Supreme Court
seems ready to declare that Election Day means exactly that. One single day, not a week, not a month, not an entire season, but just one day. And here's what makes this situation even more explosive. It's not just about the court. President Trump is simultaneously launching a powerful attack on the Senate, demanding that they immediately pass the law to save America. As many of you already know, the Supreme Court of the United States has just heard one of the most significant election law cases in recent decades. Based on what happened in the courtroom yesterday, the days when mail-in ballots mysteriously poured in after Election Day may finally be numbered. This is the case of Watson versus Republican National Committee, and it's a sensation. The RNC filed this lawsuit again in 2024, ironically targeting a Mississippi law that allowed mail-in ballots to be counted as long as they arrived within 5 business days after Election Day, provided they were postmarked by Election Day. The argument of the Republican National Committee is simple, compelling, and based on the very text of the law. Federal laws clearly define a specific designated election day, and that means exactly what they say. Any ballots that were not received on that designated day are, by definition, invalid.
Someone wants to say that they couldn't do it before Election Day, that they only had 45 days and didn't have the opportunity to fill out and mail the ballot. But he's lying, just like those people who say that a woman who changed her last name to her husband's won't be able to vote now because she'll never be able to get documents proving that she is who she is, the same person just with a different last name. It's just nonsense. You don't think so, do you? Everyone already knows that the government itself is responsible, according to this very law that the Democrats are blocking. They fix all your documents for you completely free of charge, send you anything you've lost, change your last name, and even more than that, they look for ways to find proof that you're a citizen, ways you never even knew existed, and all of this is done without costing a single penny for those who have lost these documents. And by the way, the time frame is 4 weeks. So even if you suddenly realize you don't have your documents when you receive your ballot, and you didn't know before that you were just living your life with no idea, you didn't fly on planes, you didn't go to the bank, you didn't do any of that, you just stayed at home, so to speak, and didn't know. And then the ballot arrives and you ask yourself, do I have any documents? No, you don't. So now you have plenty of time to fix all of this, to get all these documents in order and send in the ballot. Although if you receive the ballot by mail, by the way, I just thought about it, yeah, it means you already have official absentee status. It should mean that. Because what they did during COVID and after, of course, was a complete mess. But theoretically, for example, I have absentee status. I showed my document, I took a photo, I handed it over, I wrote an application, they allowed me, and now they sent it to me. So every time I confirm that I am who I am, they send me the ballot, so to speak, and now I do it this way. So, without standing in line. Okay, well, there should be at most 1.5% to 2% of the population like that, not 50% of the population. So, mass mailing of ballots to who knows whom, to who knows where, which was practiced in a large number of states run by Democrats, should not be done at all. It definitely shouldn't be allowed because each state does whatever it wants. Well, if we pass a law, and then of course there will be lawsuits about it, and the Supreme Court confirms that everything is fine and legal, then it won't be allowed anymore. No more cheating like that. They'll find new ways to cheat, but that type of cheating won't be allowed anymore. So, if you have lawful absentee status and the right to vote by mail, you don't even need to show your documents because you've already shown them before. Who are these people who supposedly rush to the post office by the millions on the last day and send in ballots that, in every case that's been checked, always say the person is voting for democracy, for the Democratic Party? Statistically, by the way, that's almost impossible. Statistically, even just based on that, it already raises at least some concern, if not suspicion or even certainty, that what you're seeing is dishonest behavior, to put it mildly, right? Yeah. Here's what one of the Supreme Court justices, Samuel Alito, said to the Democratic Party's lawyer about this.
We have quite a few expressions that, let's say, consist of two words, and the last one, or rather the second one, is day. Labor Day, Memorial Day, George Washington's birthday, Independence Day, another birthday, and of course, Election Day. And all these holidays are truly special days. So, if we start with this, if I have no other information except the phrase Election Day itself, then I assume that this is exactly the day when absolutely everything is supposed to happen.
This means that ballots must be received by a certain date, not in some floating, constantly changing window after the election. And I believe that in this series of his observations and questions, Judge Alito revealed one very simple truth. Basically, the Democrats want to extend Election Day precisely so they can have the opportunity to overturn what you did on the actual day of voting.
What does the American public think about this? We already know that 83% of Americans believe that foreigners, meaning non-U.S. citizens, shouldn't even come close to polling stations. And what do Americans think about a month of voting or 5 days of voting? And what about other ideas that seem to have been invented for just one reason, which you've probably already guessed?
83%, 83%.
It's likely voters believe that all ballots should be submitted by Election Day with no exceptions. That's the norm.
This is...
In fact, again, this has always been the norm. As Justices Gorsuch and Alito noted, this is another 80-20 issue. Americans overwhelmingly want their elections to be protected. Of course they do, and here the Democrats are once again struggling to defend their position again because their power depends on dishonest elections.
The Supreme Court will make a decision on this matter in the second half of June. That is, before the elections in November of this year. At the moment, there are 24 states, I think, or 24 states, all or almost all Democratic, where it is allowed, I think, for 5 days or maybe 3 days after, well, that is, after voting ends, to still accept tens, hundreds, or even millions more ballots. So, I don't know if the Republicans will have time to get the courts to stop accepting ballots after Election Day within this short window. But I really think that as soon as this decision is made, the Republicans will already have all the documents, applications, and almost on the same day the Supreme Court decision is made, if everything is in order and so on. Then in all those 24 or 26 states, applications will be filed for immediate compliance with the Supreme Court decision. Well, now this is incredibly important. In addition to and in support of this Supreme Court decision, I mean to push those laws through the Senate. The laws I've talked to you about several times already and said that they will be decisive. The law will be crucial for the fate of America and maybe even for the fate of the world. Because what happens here, as they say, reverberates around the world. So, of course, I'm talking about the bill called the Save America Act, the main goal of which is to prevent cheating in voting. As we've said several times already, the Democrats are fighting tooth and nail to allow cheating in voting. Of course, they present it differently. They say that if we do this, then by no means will some poor, unfortunate people be affected. Foolish people and the like. They will go to vote and won't be able to vote, from my point of view, even though this is complete nonsense. But if you're so stupid that you can't go and can't get yourself an ID, especially since, damn it, it's completely free, you don't need to spend any money. I thought I would have to spend like $100 or $150, but no, It turns out, as it says in the law, that everything is free. If you can't even, so to speak, make a call or go to a website or just go to the post office and say what you need, if you can't do that, then you absolutely shouldn't be voting. And just like with the topic of voting, the day of voting, mandatory verification of whether you are a citizen is supported by the same 83% of the population. Honestly, I still can't understand who those remaining 17% are. Maybe they're Democratic Party employees, maybe they're communists, fascists, Islamists, or something else, but still. But I can't understand how an American citizen, since the polls are conducted among American citizens, who has children here, who has family here, how can he want the fate of his family, his country, to be decided by complete thugs brought in from the third or even the fourth or fifth world who understand nothing and are ready to sell their votes for a bowl of soup, and for a very small amount of soup at that. And here comes Trump. He talks about how necessary a law to protect our rights as U.S. citizens is for the continuation of normal life in America.
So, I link national security with voter identification by photo and confirmation of citizenship for voting. And these 2 points are the most important when it comes to national security. So this should be part of the national security bill, and I urge Republican senators to do this immediately. There's no need to rush the vote. Don't worry about Easter, about the House. Do it for Jesus, all right? Do it for Jesus.
We are people who are not very experienced in parliamentary maneuvering. But in fact, what Trump said was a continuation of, and in my view, a further development of, that idea. The amazing Senator Kennedy, one of my favorite senators who has a sharp mind, a sense of humor, and well-thought-out convictions, which is very important, who said, "We will go a different way." At the same time, I'm not sure he read Vladimir Ilyich Lenin. What is this different path that Senator Kennedy proposed? There is a certain rule in the Senate that when it comes to the budget, when amending a bill submitted by the lower house, since it will be going back and forth, here and there being voted on, things will be added, removed, and so on. So, to settle this, you need to get not 60 votes like with a regular law, but 51 votes, because it's back and forth, back and forth. I don't remember the justification there, but there is such a rule. If it's related to the budget, what they call reconciliation, that is, when they're reconciling what was drafted in the Senate with what was drafted in the House, for this reconciliation, an agreement only needs 51% in both places. In the Senate, 51% equals 51 votes. In today's Senate, there are 53 senators. Republicans, 2 of them, or maybe even 3, by the way, for a number of reasons, vote against Trump. But 50 plus the vice president. And there's a rule that when it's tied, the vice president can cast their vote, so to speak, to decide one way or the other. So 50 plus the vice president is exactly what we need. By the way, Kamala Harris, when she was vice president, did this several times, as did all other vice presidents. So Senator Kennedy proposed to rewrite this bill in such a way that it would be treated as a budget measure. Since it definitely includes discussion about budget items and the amount of money that will be allocated for implementation, that's exactly what we were talking about with you. I can imagine the kind of outcry the Democrats will raise now. As you know, well, at least those people who live in America, especially those who have been in airports for the past 2 or 3 weeks, the Democrats are not approving the budget for border agency employees who inspect cargo, travelers, basically everything related to baggage. And that's why in airports, because they haven't approved the budget, some of the workers said, "We have to. We are obliged to go somewhere and earn money. We can't wait." There were far fewer employees in the airports, and huge lines formed for 3, 4, 5, even 6 hours until Trump brought people in on Tuesday. On Tuesday morning, representatives from ICE immediately cleared the lines at the airports, and now Trump is planning to add the National Guard there or replace ICE with the National Guard. So Musk said that he would pay the salaries for these people. This is the agency that inspects cargo, but it's a complicated procedure, so it might take some time. So Trump is demanding that two documents, one related to funding border guards, which he considers part of national security, and another about banning non-citizens from voting, which he also sees as national security, be combined. This way, there will be a new law. There will be a law related to national security that will cover several different things and will change the budget. That is, it will add, modify, and correct it. So instead of needing 60 out of 100 votes, you only need 50 plus 1.
The most important part of national security is identification. No one can vote on national security issues. Citizenship verification, and you can't have national без удостоверения личности избирателя. Citizenship verification, so we connect them.
As you just saw, President Trump is in a combative mood, and his target is the U.S. Senate. Just after returning from a rally in Memphis on Monday, you heard him issue one of his most direct ultimatums for a second term. He demands that there be no DHS funding agreement without the Save America Act, period. Now, for those who need a reminder, the Save America Act does two important things. It requires documentary proof of U.S. citizenship to register for federal elections and mandates showing a photo ID at the polling place. The House of Representatives has already passed it. Now all attention is on the Senate, which unfortunately has been dragging its feet on this for months. Trump is tired of the delays. He is demanding that the Senate directly link the rescue bill to a vote on restoring and funding the Department of Homeland Security, which the Democrats are blocking.
Ladies and gentlemen, of course I must tell you at the end that if you haven't subscribed yet, you definitely should. But most importantly, after you have subscribed today or whenever you saw the bell and clicked on it, because that's a signal to the algorithm from you that this is interesting. And I would like to receive information about this as early as possible. That's what the algorithm tells itself. It's smart. It's AI. It says, oh, maybe this will be interesting to other people, and it starts showing it to other people who fit a profile similar to yours. If you liked it, then maybe other people who belong to a certain category or categories will like it too. People, let's say, from 40 to 70 years old, who came from another country, speak Russian, live in the United States of America or in Germany or in Israel, and are interested in politics, interested in news, and so on, and so on. They receive this message. So if you think that what we're doing here is important and interesting, then boom, hit the bell. That's all. Goodbye.